Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I have two amazing guests. I have Amit Tishler and I have Elliot Sperl. They are the co-creators and writers of The Last Wardens. Thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to dig in. Hopefully, both of you are doing well. How's everything going so far?
Going great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. No, it's
Still
a
alive.
pleasure. Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's always a good place to start.
Exactly. Well, before we kind of jump into the actual title, I always love to understand where this passion for storytelling starts and all of the folks that we have on the podcast. I think it's fascinating. Everybody has a different story. So here's my question for both of you. When did the passion for storytelling start in your life? And was there a person that was highly involved in helping you understand that passion?
Wow, great question. Um,
Start.
yeah, wow, that's a humdinger. I would say that passion for storytelling, I think Amit and I have always been huge fans of comics for as long as we can possibly remember. And we both come from animation as well, which is, very story focused and also kind of a collaborative effort. So the two of us teaming up to, tell our own stories kind of seems like a no-brainer. We ended up meeting at what was it? I keep mixing them up. It wasn't Stupid Buddy. It was Starburns first, right? Starburns Studio on HBO's Animals. And yeah, I remember me coming up from the basement cubicles and meeting the upstairs crew, and there he was. We hit it off, and been
That
working
was
on.
subtle and unnoticeable as always.
Yeah, you don't make much of an impression at first. And yeah, we've just been kind of working on stories ever since. But if there was a specific person who kind of kicked it off, oh man,
Like maybe a teacher or something like that, or a family member that kind of started that passion. Like, wow, I could tell some stories too.
what are you thinking, Amit?
So, I mean, I can speak for myself, not
Please,
for you.
yeah.
I guess I've always been like a big media consumer in general, right? And I'm not just talking comics, it's comics, video games, television. Like that's the thing that has led me throughout my entire life. I didn't grow up in the States, so getting some of the content was always a bigger challenge, but I would always go for it. I don't know where the passion for storytelling from specifically, because I think that's really, really hard to track. But I do know that the way I've approached it over the years has certainly evolved in a certain way. So when I was a kid, my mom is a big storyteller as well. So is my grandma. Like, we do have that going on with some members of the family. I was a visual artist like Elliot. So you start from 2D art. What do? You tell stories and you draw comics because that's a thing that you can supposedly do on your own, even if not professionally. That obviously led into animation because a big passion of mine has always been TV and film as well. So linear affected it. And at that point, you're as an aspiring artist originally, you're looking to essentially recreate the feeling that you got from the things that you love, right? You start by imitation. You become a professional later down the line and you find your own voice in it if you're lucky. But it really just starts from like, I got this emotion, or I've learned these lessons, or it left this impact in me, and I want to be able to do the same, pull the same magic trick, right? So I think originally it really came from that feeling of like, God, I love this. And you have this like weird jealousy or like envy of like, and I still have this, by the way, like if you watch or play or read something really good and you're like, oh, motherfucker, like this is good. I need to learn how to do something like this, or I want to be able to do it. And that comes from a good place, right? Like for any artist of any kind, like that's how you get inspired. I think as I grew older and became the kind of weirdo that I am nowadays, writing the kinds of stories that I defaulted to writing, because that also evolved, right? Like you kind of start, I think a lot of animators went through this, like you go through a certain time period, you do a lot of these like visual gags. Adult Swim was like a big inspiration before we ended up working on Adult Swim shows, right? But in the end, when you find and you land with your own voice, you come with a different approach. And for me, it's always been, if there's something that I want to convey, a message, a statement, a sentiment, or a value, this format or this ability to tell stories through different mediums, not just comics, now allows me to have a platform. And both me and Elliot have been using that to also convey messages or talk about philosophies related to what we believe in, and be able to convey that to an audience through a vehicle that is more entertaining. So for me, that has always been like a big part of it as well. And also just a way of, I guess, like conveying emotion, because I'm not, and Elliot knows this about me, I'm not a very emotional person, so it's a way for me to be able to connect to it and convey it in a more efficient way than I can as the weirdo that I am. So it's kind of, those are the layers that go through my head when you ask that question.
I love it. I love it. There's not a right or wrong answer either, right? I mean, it's really just your experience, but that's amazing. And then for both of you, my next question is, growing up, having this passion for storytelling, what was that first story that maybe you were either working together on or had individually that you were able to bring into the professional world?
Oh,
Oh my.
that's a bit tricky.
So when you say professional world, do you mean like something you were able to publish or exexecute on?
Yeah, or you got paid on.
Work together. Yeah. See, that's even more multi-layered. You know what? I'll let Elliot give you his version of it. I'll give you my version of it.
Sure.
Also versions.
So yeah, I mentioned, I met him at Starburns. Just kind of going through a whole history, working together here for a hot second. So, in terms of things that we were paid to actually, get out there, yeah, we were animators on a bunch of shows together. But in terms of comics alone, that started working together at Stupid Buddy. I think we were in this small little cabin in a giant garage, like a Home Depot cabin that was in a giant cubicle garage filled with animators and desks and stuff. Oh, and we were just stuck in this weird little corner. We're like, hey, I got ideas, you got ideas, let's shoot the shit, and kind of like, oh, that's a good idea. We should refine this. We should talk about this. And that kind of, I think the first idea we came across was Breachers. Yeah, of course.
It actually started as a game design.
Yeah, because you were going through the startup.
Yeah.
God, yeah. It started as a game design, and then I think that kind of evolved into a story that we wanted to pitch for an animated series, and then that slowly got changed completely and flipped on its head to become another idea called Hector Nomicon that didn't really go anywhere, but we developed the hell out of it. And then this is where it gets very weird. I'm pretty sure this is where you're going, Amit. We do have a bunch of titles that we have been paid for, and we got paid for to do, and are going to be released, but they're all coming out kind of in reverse. So
really?
Kind of can't talk about a lot of them because they're done. They're very exciting, but sorry.
I said that's the world of publishing for you.
Yeah, that's the world of publishing, exactly. So we're really excited about them. They're all coming out completely backwards. So
that's pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
It's weird, right? Like we've been pitching and developing stuff together for a while. Our first year of, I think, starting to develop comics specifically was surprisingly more successful than we expected. So we ended up getting like 4 different publishing deals just on that first year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and 2 of them were, and that's what Elliot's talking about, 2 of them were like with Mad Cave, another 2 were with Humanoids Publishing. And the Humanoids books, we actually started working on first, but the Mad Cave titles came out first. So that's the reversal. I think for me, the background is slightly different because I came from a short film, let's say from doing a lot of short films, because that's what I was trained to do. So I've had little short animated shorts like in film festivals and stuff like that. So that, I could always count that as some of my initial publishing work. As well as, like I got shows optioned before, so I got to do like scripts and develop pilots and stuff like that. But when we started developing stuff together, it certainly it certainly pivoted in a different direction. I think like for me also career-wise, it's been weird because like Elliot said, I ran a startup for multiple years, and during that startup, I had my own team to manage, and my, let's say, work for hire and IP development during that time period was very dedicated to the company itself. Everything was owned by the company, everything was owned by investors. So it kind of took me on a very weird path in terms of what I had to do and how I had to do it. Nowadays, you just get to take all of this experience and all of this like weird career path and all just flood it all into one thing, and that's what we're doing right now. I published with Mad Cave Studios Eden Frost before Last Wardens came out. So to me, as far as my first comic title that got published, it was Eden Frost, right? And that was, it started in 2023, like the, you know, like issues run, and then in May, the trade paperback came out, and then Last Wardens started coming out. Like Last Wardens #1 started coming out in July in San Diego Comic-Con. So it was very like back to back, and that back-to-backness is now continuing because we got more publishing deals afterwards, and we got publishing deals that aren't just in comics, which we can get into because that's certainly tied to part of the Last Wardens, I guess, mythos or franchise at this point. But at this point, we are still following that track of all of these titles that we started working on all the way back at 2021. Wow. And now it's going probably all the way to like 2027. So then Lord knows what's going to come after it. So that's kind of where we are right now.
I love it. I love it. Now, both of you have told stories in different formats, right? Comic books, animation, games. When you approach the different types of storytelling, do you approach it the exact same way, or do you look at animation differently than you look at comic books just from a storytelling standpoint? Is there major differences on how you execute?
I mean, I would say no. I would say that it's kind of the same thing. We focus on a singular theme and revolve everything around it. I think the only major difference between comics and animation in particular would be kind of the medium. So, for example, what you're able to utilize on 1920 by 1080, 24 frames a second is a little bit different than what you can fit inside different shaped comic panels. And we utilize that in Last Wardens too. Like we integrate story elements into like every conceivable part of that. So, I mean, do you disagree with me? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it really comes down to when we develop something, we don't think about it with medium first, right? Like you said, we think about it as story first, as world building first, as characters first. Like what I think, like for both of us, because we're big consumers of multimedia, in like media in general, we're never as precious with one medium over another. Right? If you build something that is solid, there is a way to tell that story through multiple mediums. The trick is that you can't treat all of them. So that's the difference between development and production or adaptation. You can't treat all mediums as the same thing. It can't be flat because each medium has its advantages or disadvantages, and you want to kind of rethink about how to tell this story when you put it through a certain output. So, if we think of Last Wardens again, we wrote essentially the same story arc for the audio drama very, very differently than we wrote it for the comic. And the choices that we made were by design meant to leverage what that medium offers that the other one doesn't, to differentiate them, but also to make them complementary and make them stand on its own. So I think as long as you're not autopiloting it, and you treat the production and adaptation part as an important part of the process, and you're respectful to it, right? It's not just an opportunity to spit it out in another medium. It's an opportunity to tell the story in a way that's different, that's going to give the listeners, players, readers, viewers a different experience that they won't get elsewhere. Which also, like considering conversion between mediums isn't a given, right? Like some people only listen to audiobooks and podcasts. Some people love comics. Some people only play video games. Like, they don't necessarily convert. So when you treat each of them, you have to kind of take that into account and treat it like this is the first product that people will come into. How do I make this worth their while also not forgetting that there is an existing fan base that comes from one to another? What would convince them to jump from one adaptation to another and still go, I am glad that I did this because I got so much extra for it? So that's, I think, a big part of how we tackle this problem wherever we go.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
well
that's
said. Yeah.
so well put. Go ahead, Elliot, please. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, but knocked out of the park there. That
Yeah, no,
sums
that
up.
was amazing. I think that could be so helpful for other people that are, that have this passion for storytelling too, just to kind of understand that, as far as the story goes, you approach it the same way, right? You just want to tell a really good story. How it comes out on the other end, correct me if I'm wrong, Amit, but how it comes out on the other end, obviously is going to be dictated by that forum, right? Whether it's animation or a game. But I think that's so good because I think, at least in my mind, there might be a different approach for each one. And I'm glad that it starts with story. Story is king. And then once you have the story, right, wherever it goes after that, you'll make the adjustments necessary, but you don't take away from the story to make that happen, which I think is so crucial for other storytellers to understand that they don't have that experience. I think that's amazing. Great advice, both of you.
In the end, thank you. Like, in the end, that's your anchor, right? That is your anchor. That is the thing that gives your product authenticity as well. If you are, and you can tell when something is just a conversion, right? Not an adaptation. When someone is just going, I'm just going to re-release this as another thing. It doesn't matter how much money you put into it. It doesn't matter how much production value is. Like, you can put lipstick on this pig all you want. But in the end of the day, does it feel authentic to its origins? Does it feel authentic to the story, to the messaging? And we are, as audiences, I think, a lot smarter and a lot more sensitive to that than ever. So in a sense, for newcomers, the bar has been set a lot higher. I think across the board, I think people who worked like 30 years ago had it a lot easier. Right, in terms of what they had to worry about in terms of their output. And I think that goes into that level of quality because as consumers, we're just more experienced and a little bit smarter or a little bit more attentive, for good or bad.
Yeah. No, that makes a
What are you
lot
talking about? We came in with just like a post-it note and just kind of slapped it on Matt Cave's back. Monsters. Yeah, you guys in?
This is what we're doing, guys. Any questions?
It's funny because we have like a giant doc that's just nothing but lore and characters and backgrounds.
I love it.
It's great.
Now, you talked about the output right now. Just from a creator standpoint, are you more satisfied on certain ways that story comes through, whether it's animation or a comic book or a game? Or are you satisfied with they're all your babies? And if I could tell this one story and it's just a comic book, I'm happy with that. But if it's animated, I get even more excited because I love that more than I love just, you know what I mean? Is there one that you enjoy more than the other since you've had experience in all these?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, my heart and soul goes into animation, so I'm always going to be a little bit biased and love, solid animated content. That said, once again, I don't think it matters. This is what you're able to utilize. I think, and each one kind of presents an opportunity. Comics, it is very obviously visuals and story centric. Audio drama, you get to actually, be in the head of the characters and you kind of get little sound effects on top of it. Animation is kind of the full basket along with, moments hopefully with, fantastic animated acting that kind of really shows where the characters are at and kind of adds that subtle detail into each and every second. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess each one kind of brings their own, pluses and minuses, I guess.
Yeah, it is a good question. Like, I'm not sure, like, I'm a big fan of a lot of different mediums, but I think it really comes down to how excited I am about what a certain adaptation did over another. Like, I like those kinds of puzzles to an obsessive degree. which makes me sometimes a nightmare to work with. But it's kind of like if you took a risk and you did something that is different, or you challenge yourself in a certain way. I know that no matter how I feel at the moment about one version of a product, I might feel differently simply because it's a big part of the journey, right? So you convert something or you adapt something into a different medium, you make a decision, and all of a sudden that becomes its own thing. And now you're very attached to it because you're proud of what you've done in that medium. So it matters less how much you like the medium, and it becomes more about the piece itself, because to you, it represents this puzzle you've cracked, or you're very proud with how you tackled it. And I think like I've had multiple instances throughout my career and my life that kind of caught me off guard by like, I didn't think I would care about this much, but you know what? This ended up being good. So I'm proud of it, damn it. So I really, I don't know. It's a complicated thing to wrap your head around. Also because I tend to consume more mediums like than ever, I think, because of accessibility.
Yeah.
Now you can consume the same things on your phone, on your iPad, on your computer. Like me and my wife sit together, one of us plays video games and the other one reads, and then we switch, and like, I don't know, man. Like, I really think it comes down to the product itself at the end of the day and what it represents to me as a consumer or as a creator, and how I feel about it beginning to end.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's jump into the Last Wardens. We have the collected works coming up. It looks like the FOC is going to be in February. 162 pages, which is absolutely amazing. Let's really quick talk about the rest of the team. So we have on art, we have, help me with the pronunciation. Is it Rue?
Yeah, Ruiz Silveria.
Ruiz, yes.
Yeah.
So the art is incredible. If it's okay, I'm just gonna share like the cover and maybe the first couple pages without giving away too much of the story, if you're okay with that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a look at it because it is quite beautiful.
So real quick,
credit, the cover.
Yeah, this is Zach Howard.
Yeah, Zach Howard. I'm sorry. Yeah,
yeah.
The cover is Zach Howard. Yeah, but the interiors are all Ruiz, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is Zach's cover, which is amazing.
So Zach and Danielle Nelson did all the covers, so like ink and art, and
beautiful.
Really, it complements everything in such an amazing way. And it actually fits with the interior through. Once again, it feels authentic to it, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, 100%. The art is stunning. And as I look at this cover and I've read through most of it, I know kind of what's going on. And it gets a little nutty, to be quite honest, in a good way. Like it comes out of nowhere and you're like, what the heck am I reading, man? This like took a turn really quick with her brother showing up out of nowhere and everyone being kind of surprised. So anyways, we don't want to give too much of the story away, but I will tell you, if you do love horror, if you love kind of a whodunit type of a story, this is definitely the story for you, because there's all kinds of turns that you're not going to be ready for, which I absolutely love, right? That's what keeps these kind of stories super interesting. And yeah, it was a blast. So let's look at some of the interior as well. That eyeball is pretty freaky.
Yes. Eyeballs and teeth become a common occurrence.
Exactly. Yeah, that is for sure. That is for sure. But that was Danny on the front page right there.
Yes. They did, like, Matt Cave did such a beautiful job on the interior design as well, just because, my God, their books. Just gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, here's Bleakwood. So when you're reading the comic book and you see what she's going through with her father, and then her brother showing up after a certain amount of time from the Vietnam War, and then you name the town Bleakwood. I love it, because if you know her story a little bit and what she's gone through, it does feel a little bleak, right? And so yes. I don't know if that was your thought process. I assume it is with Bleakwood, but that was hilarious. I love it, man. Yeah. But you could see just the detail. I mean, I love really good art. And no doubt when you get into certain panels, some could be a lot more simpler than not. But I love it when an artist really puts a lot of work into the background. And you could just see a picture just like this. The detail that goes into it has just been chef's kiss, my friends. Chef's kiss for
Yeah,
sure.
we got really lucky with the entire team,
Yeah.
honestly. Everybody brought their A game from beginning to end. And this title specifically, because of how we've written it, had a lot of challenges. And we were a little worried. We're like, okay, let's see if they get what we're going for now. But everybody did. I mean, lettering it alone was also its own challenge, and Frank did a really good job, because we have, like, as you notice throughout the stories, there's multiple things, and Elliot could get deeper into it. Like, we wanted to once again leverage the medium to its full extent, and leave, and knowing that we also wanted to expand this into a more expansive kind of like cross-media franchise, we wanted to plant in little hints that could, no matter which medium you're consuming it in, pay off in the long run. Like, no decision is arbitrary. That's all, like, I can say.
I mean, even in this panel,
I'm sorry, Elliot, please.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm just saying, like, even in this panel, there's visual elements in this that had to be at least two that I could see right off the, sorry, three right off the bat that, make, constant comebacks, one in the very background itself. So no spoilers, but yeah, there's definitely a lot here, even on panel 1, page 1, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I see the birds right there, and as we get going, that becomes even funnier, just so you know. So we won't go too far in, but you could see just the color tones throughout the comic book really kind of brings you in and focuses you in on that character as you start to see the character development take place, which is great. It's almost like a light shining on that character constantly, which I absolutely love. And it's a lot of fun. And then kind of that entire group of friends that she has plays such a pivotal role on whether she kind of remains in that situation or she tries to remove herself, which we don't want to get too much into, and you'll kind of see what happens. But there's a lot going on, which is absolutely incredible, and even makes kind of that turn when she finds her brother even more impactful, because you're like, wait a minute, what the heck is what's happening here? And when you start to talk about some of the other mediums, I could see, I don't know if you read those books when you were younger, where you would read a chapter and then at the end of the chapter, it would give you a couple different options of what you think the next chapter should be. So you could go to like page 48 and this character does this, or you could go to page 62 and this character does this. As I'm reading this, you're constantly being provided these decisions. And obviously, you don't know what the decision is going to be made until you flip the page, but you could think about it like, what would I do in this scenario? And so, as we start to look at this title and know that there's other mediums that you're taking the story into, maybe you could kind of talk about, was that on purpose? And is that also feeding into some of these other mediums that you're looking at?
There are so at this point, we can kind of, talk about this a lot more openly, but one of the interesting things with all three adaptations is that, one of our pillars was that we have to treat each product of the Last Wardens as something that has to stand on its own. So that if you are a newcomer, you never read the comic, sure, you can start from the first moment of the audio drama and you wouldn't be, you'd be none the wiser. But that if you jump from one medium to another, all of a sudden you'll see things differently, or it will reframe your thinking of specific moments. And essentially, like, every time you make a jump, you get added value, but you never get your value reduced by sticking to one. So that had to be just a core philosophy with everything that we did. And all three products of the Last Wardens that are all coming out on March 11th have that approach, and they all feed into each other in slightly different ways. So, for example, the tabletop RPG is all about world building. It actually doesn't even feature the characters from the comic or the audio drama, right? So it's 100% world building because we're dealing with essentially unraveling the mystery of what world this is happening in. The story that the audio drama follows is essentially a different retelling of the same story from the comic that you're looking at the straight paperback, but telling the entire story through Danielle's point of view in present tense. So you're experiencing it in real time through her eyes and through her mind. That, as a decision alone, already gives you a little bit of an idea of what kind of implications it's going to have. Those 2 pages that you just showed cannot exist, right? Because she's not there.
Yeah.
So how did we handle the beginning, and how did we convey the same information or different information in the audio drama? So there are a lot of instances of that that are planted in multiple points throughout the story, and that's why it feels that way. Even in places where you didn't realize it was that way, you will find out while you go into the audio drama. There are moments in the comic that, when you read them as is, they seem normal, like, or they seem justified. Like, you know, there's a moment in chapter 4, in like issue 4, chapter 4, Danny touches, you know, the door frame. She touches, like, we see that the little veins are crawling, and we see that she's crying. Totally normal to that reaction to that situation. Without revealing anything, I can tell you that in the audio drama, you get so much context into what she's going through that moment that really fleshes out everything and makes you rethink some of her decisions throughout the story, or understanding her in a different way. But it fleshes out scenes that just don't exist in the comic, but really leverage what we get from doing this in a different medium and being in her head and hearing her thoughts. So that's kind of how we like to tackle all of it. Now, if you're a tabletop gamer, you're coming into the tabletop RPG, you don't even have to be familiar with Danny Pryor and the story of these wardens in particular. But if you came in from the comic, a lot of the mysteries that are being presented, because Danny's coming in as the POV character for the audiences, she has no idea what this is all about. Well, who are these creatures? What are they chasing? What the fuck is a drifter? Like, to her, this is all new, because that's the readers coming in as well. If you go into the tabletop RPG's lore pages, all of a sudden you kind of understand 90% of what's going on, or the things that she doesn't know yet. But you don't have to. If you want to experience it as a mystery, you experience it as a mystery through these mediums. So that's kind of how we tackled the whole family of products.
I love it. I love it. Can you kind of talk about how much more you had to put into the story in order to bring it to audio?
Oh my God. We practically rewrote the whole thing. I mean, it's when you write a comic script, a lot of it is obviously the dialogue and the flow of it. But for the audio, God, we wrote the whole thing. The lines from the actual comic itself are minuscule in comparison.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we have all the original lines from the comic are there, right? But in addition to them, you have essentially like the most dominant voice of all, which is what's going on through Danny's head in real time. And sometimes it goes into her memories and plays scenes from the past. So there is more new content than old content in the audio drama as a whole, because every episode is also like 20 minutes long, 21 minutes long. So it's a very different experience while still telling essentially the same bullet points of the story. But there was a lot of new content in that adaptation, and we had to really think about how to write it, because we don't get to rely on visuals. And you've read through this book, you know how visually reliant it is, right? So how do you describe this visceral image from, let's say, the end of the first chapter? How do you describe the entire build-up to it without also being overly wordy? Because that's the danger, right? You don't want to just bore audiences with like, here are endless descriptions. And you do that when you're doing something more like a narration. But that was also part of the choice. We didn't want to make it a narration of a character that is smarter now because she's already been through the experience and she's telling you the story about it. This is a character who's now processing this in real time and reacting to what she's seeing in real time. She's not going to be as eloquent. She's not going to be as long-winded about it. It's going to be simple. It's going to be visceral. Sometimes it's going to be funny. because the thoughts that will come to your head when you're trying to describe what it is you're trying to escape or dodge, it's something unfiltered. So it has a very interesting and very grounded vibe that really keeps the same energy that the comic has up. Because like I said, like when it flips, it goes wild. It's like a freight train, right? And we wanted to have the same momentum in the audio drama, but to still be able to allow people to know what's going on and to understand and to envision it themselves without having to tie themselves into how it looks in the comic. Like if you're just listening to the audio drama, you might have a slightly different, it'll be the same thing, but you'll have a slightly image in your head, slightly different image. That's room that we want to leave people to have. Even how they imagine Dani. We know how she looks like, but if all you're listening to is an audio drama, you don't really know much, and that's part of the fun. You become an additional storyteller in a sense. So we wanted to leave a lot of room to keep things very grounded, high energy, always fun, and not overly bogged down by having to describe the same thing with accuracy to how it looked like in the comic. Because authenticity was a lot more important than accuracy in that sense.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. As you're reading comic books, and I do this all the time, I'm adding voices to each of those people. So in my mind, I know what Dani sounds like, right? Because I've gotten immersed into the story, and so I think going from that and then to the audio to actually hear that voice. It'll be really fun to see if the voice that's been given to Dani matches the voice that I've already created in my own mind. Which
the voice actors bring it so hard. Oh, they are phenomenal. There's no other way to put it. We are so excited. Oh my god!
I can also tell you that in the casting choices, at least in one of them, there's kind of a reveal just by the casting choice itself.
True.
One character might be not what you expect it to be.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. I absolutely love it because it causes you as a reader or a consumer to have to exercise differently. Those creative juices that we all kind of have. I think everyone has creative juices. Some obviously have an ability to put that into a story and then tell the story. Others have that, like me as a reader, to be able to kind of create the world as you're telling me what the world should look like, which I absolutely, that's why I love this medium, right? I love comic books for that reason. But I'm so excited about the audible version of that and the extra layers that have been added with the voices behind that to see if it matches what I've already created in my own head for all these characters. I think that's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, and in the same vein, the tabletop RPG as well. I mean, you get to create your own world.
Your own characters,
your own stories, exactly.
Yeah, and in that one, we really go into explaining essentially how let's call it the magic system works. You really get a clear idea of like, oh, so this is what Bruce was exposed to. By the end of the story, even if you haven't gotten to it yet, you'll kind of get an idea of what happened to him. And if you read through the lore of it, if you continue reading future volumes, you'll get the full picture regardless. But in the tabletop RPG, right off the bat, you're like, this is what it is. This is how it works. Oh, this is more or less why the Last Wardens were created. This is their place in the world. Like, you get a very different kind of clarity, but now you get to do what you do in that medium, which is create your own story, which once again, if you're trying to adapt a property like this to a medium, what is the most important thing in tabletop gaming? People want to create their own stories. It's a storyteller medium.
No, it's dice rolling, actually. Sorry.
Have you ever seen me dice roll? I am an embarrassment. I am an embarrassment.
Is there a wrong way to do it, Amit?
Yes. The way I do it. The way I do it is always wrong. And every time I play, sometimes it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter if I put it into the little box, it'll end up on the other side of the room. I don't know how to explain it. It's physics dumbfuckery, and yeah. So
I have a feeling you're quite the aggressive dice roller, my friend.
I try not to be, but then when I go like, fine, I'm just gonna try and be gentle about it, it just drops. Come come on, this is so. Yes, there is a wrong way to roll a dice, and I cracked it.
You cracked it. So, Elliot, are you the official dice roller on this team? Then is that?
Kinda, yeah. We were talking early on about fun ways to adapt wardens, and yeah, of course, I'm a huge tabletop RPG guy. Love Dungeons and Dragons. Matter of fact, I mean, some of the elements of the story were inspired by it, honestly. So yeah, devoured the most recent 2024 books from them. Played a little bit of Shadowrun with it. Our campaign we've gone through the same group of people, multiple years. I think 2 official campaigns and one-off so far.
Oh wow!
So it's been. I love it. I love rolling dice. I love creating characters. I love creating characters, especially when I'm stressed, because that's a stress response. And with all the projects we have going on, I have like 1 billion characters now, so it's great. So yeah, I'm really excited about the tabletop RPG. And the thing is that Bart and John at Studio Far Horizons nailed it. Like, not only did they nail the lore, but they also the feeling of, I mean, a core central idea to Wardens is failure, and they embrace that as a mechanic, and it's so awesome and fun. And the way they incorporate a bunch of like really intelligent like things in it, I can't, like, you got to get the book to actually get what I'm talking about. But the way they integrate failure, the way they get integrate death, the way they get to integrate there's moments in tabletop RPGs where a character dies, but they get to go out in a blaze of glory. Like, there's so many fun elements that they put in there, and having that to play with, whatever your version of the monster of the week is I can't wait.
Yeah, and that really, what you just said really emphasizes one of the importances of having that, I think, part of your development process. Because when he says, like, it fits a lot of the theme of failure, he's not kidding. And the idea of having a theme or a statement, so that word failure, it was literally in our pitch that we originally did to publishers, including Mad Cave. This is a story about failure, what it means to, chew it out, spit it out, ask for seconds. Like, that was there. It was written. When we handed this off to Studio Far Horizons to start designing game mechanics about it, they did what a good adaptation does, kept it authentic. They looked at the pillars of what constructed a Last Warden's product or experience, and they converted it into what the medium offers. And that really goes back to that idea of, like, hey, when you want to adapt something, don't just autopilot it. Like, that's how you want to do it. You want to understand what it is that you're dealing with. And it always goes beyond. If you developed your story with that level of detail, or with that understanding of what it's meant to represent, what are the pillars, you're never going to lose sight of that. And you're always going to be able to leverage it in a lot of different ways. And that's a really good example of that. Like, turning it into a mechanic, brilliant. And that makes it feel authentic. It means that no matter what kind of story you're going to write, it is going to end up feeling like a Last Warden story. Right?
Yeah.
So my assumption is, when you started to develop the story at the very beginning, you always had this in mind, that you would have the visual when it comes to the eventual trade, which we're getting right now, the RPG. Was the audio always part of that kind of triangle of storytelling that you've created with the story?
So, to be accurate, no. so when we developed something, again, story first, we actually had no idea what medium it was going to go into first. So we created something as, hey, we could turn this into anything. It's just a good story. It's a good world. It's a good narrative. That's how we develop everything. And the themes are just inherent to that. That's the foundation. We went in and pitched this. I think we pitched multiple iterations, because Last Wardens has been essentially in development between us for years. And I'm not kidding. We've had multiple versions with different names, a lot of the same characters. Danielle Pryer, as, like, we love seeing how connected people are to her, especially knowing that the original version of this, which was called Warlocked and then Night Legion, didn't have her at all. She was the last edition to the Last Warden's lore.
Oh,
And she
wow.
ended up dominating it, right? And that's hard to imagine now because she is such a force and you're telling it from her perspective.
It's
But
hard to imagine the Wardens even existing without Danny as the
exactly,
centerpiece. So that's pretty
exactly.
interesting that she came in last.
Yep. And that was actually the origin of it. So development wise, it went through so many iterations and different states of evolution. But the fact is that was always within the realm of the story itself. We had no idea because in the end of the day, you don't know who is going to write the check. That's the honest truth. And when we pitched this as a comic and it got picked up, we're like, we have a starting point and we're going to make it count and it's going to be a good comic and it's going to be a good book and we're going to continue this. All of the deals honestly came out of a combination of pursuit and internal strategy because we recognize, hey, now we're essentially kicking off the story. We're putting it out there. It has readers. How else, what other opportunities does this give us? And it was very proactive, right? So the audio drama came because we were seeking ways of getting this into other mediums, but we didn't know which ones are going to land until somebody says, yes, we'll do it. Because in the end, we're not the ones writing the check. We're not the ones financing it, which makes a really big difference. But it also shifts the strategy of how you have to think about it, because the downside of the doing it yourself, aside from having to market it yourself and not having the platform and having to finance, there is another downside, and I think it's the fact that you, as creators, we're a little narcissistic. All of us have that to some degree. So you're like, my version is the best version. I can just imagine this. And if I wanted to make an audio drama, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to do it like this. You're not limited by any external force. And I think there is goodness, or there is good in having a roadblock. There's good in having that kind of challenge of, I need to pitch this to somebody who needs to then finance and produce the thing and essentially have a stake in its success. How do I get them excited? Because just having a good idea sometimes isn't enough, right? Or they have other concerns that I need to take into account. And maybe my vision of what would make the best version doesn't fit with theirs. And that just forces you to think about more original or unique solutions to problems that you wouldn't have if you had no roadblocks in making the thing yourself. So both for the tabletop and the audio drama, we didn't know it was going to end up in those mediums. These are opportunities we started pursuing that ended up landing. That's the short version. And that's going to be true to everything else moving forward. In the end, what we had when we started was just our pitch Bible, the original designs that Elliot designed. Like, we had all the details and we had all of the components. We had no idea where it was going to go until the opportunity actually, solidified.
Awesome. I love it, man. Just the process behind it too. I think, as a consumer of all these mediums, when you get that final product, I don't think we realize the heart, sweat, probably tears that goes into the creation. We get the final product, we're like, wow, this is awesome. I love kind of digging into the behind the scenes, just to add a little bit more appreciation to everything that goes into how the team operated together, the final production, and everything that went into getting to the finish line. I think that's just a side of the mediums that we enjoy that a lot of times as a consumer we don't get to see. And I think it's important to realize that there's a lot that goes into all of this, a ton of it.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's look, both me and Elliot came from a background of, when you work for somebody else, we work in very big productions, right? You would have sometimes hundreds of people producing a show, or even a team of like 20 people producing a game or a location-based experience. It's still like, it's all collaborative endeavors. Comics and a lot of the like more indie stuff is a lot smaller and it's a lot closer because now it's your thing. And there are a lot of challenges that you don't necessarily, when you start, even think about, and you really should think about once you decide, I'm just going to do this myself. And I don't know. Elliot can speak for himself. I know that for me, there is this weird mix when something is finally done. It's both incredibly satisfying, but also oddly anticlimactic.
Oh, we are
Because,
so on the same page with that.
right?
100% the same page.
It's bizarre. And I think like to me, if I try to like reverse engineer the emotional journey, to me it always feels like you've been exposed to it so much every single day. Then when you put that final piece, you're like, all right, I've already looked at this a million times. This is just this plus that final piece. I mean, like somebody else seeing it for the first time, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, it came out of nowhere. For you, you've been looking at it every single day. So while you're like, oh, check off the task, you're like, all right, yeah, I know this thing. Next. It's weird. It's a weird disconnect.
In one sense, it's kind of sad, but I guess that's
Yeah,
just the reality of it, right? Because
it is. It
yeah,
is, but it's
so what do you do from a like a personal exercise to be able to appreciate when you do accomplish something, knowing that because you've been in it and consumed by it for so long that it is a little bit anticlimactic when you finally get it finished because you've been involved so much. Is there something that you try to do to ensure that you really get some appreciation at a higher level when you do complete something?
Two things.
Yes.
First, always try and work on the next thing. Try and develop the next thing. Second thing, take some dice and just throw it at the wall. Just
Yeah.
throw it straight at the wall. See what happens. Yeah.
that's what I automatically do, isn't that the way you're that's, but no, I think that first one really hits hard. You're right. Like it's immediately okay. What's next? And the what's next could also be in the product itself because you essentially look at it as a list of challenges. You finished when we finished writing Last Wardens. That conversation already started of like, how do we make more of it? How do we continue it? Where do we take it? That is a completely different challenge. And once you conquer that, boom, you get a new set of challenges to tackle. So it's this never-ending DLC journey, right? Just going through that Souls game from now until forever. But I will say, like, in some sense, for me personally, and we had this today, and I'm pretty sure, Elliot, you felt the same. Like, we just got the first, like, mixed finished episode of the audio drama drop in our mailbox. Now, at this point, even though we wrote it, we're not producing the actual thing, right? We were heavily involved. We were producers in a sense of helping to get some of the voice actors, helping to line things up, writing the trailer scripts, like doing marketing. But in the end, you are partnering with a production company that takes all the components that everybody put together and they essentially do it behind a curtain. The curtain that in your part of production, you're always the one behind. So for us, we've written this thing, it's went through editing, it's been like months and months and months, and all of a sudden the first episode just drops mixed. And we both listened to it for the first time and we're like, hey! So you get that satisfaction all of a sudden. And in a sense, it's you get it more when you start working with these kinds of partnerships because some things are just out of your control. There are downsides to it, but that's one of the upsides. When you get something back and it is good and it's how you wanted it to be, and it's like, there is nothing more satisfying than that. Like, that is such a huge hit.
So wild to listen to it.
Yeah.
So good.
I love it, man. I cannot wait till it's available. So let's talk about that, right? So at the very beginning, we talked about the Last Wardens, that the FOC is February 17th. So that means US fans need to get to your comic shops and start talking about this now with all your comic shops. You have till the 17th to pre-order. So I'll make sure below everything is spelled out for you. Exactly what you need to do in order to get your comic shop to order it for you, and also have a couple extra issues on hand for other people to kind of stumble upon. And then it looks like it's going to arrive in stores March 11th and 12th, depending if you're a Tuesday store or a Wednesday store when you put out all the new titles. So we got some time to kind of spread the word and get this out there to make sure people are ordering it.
We now have this weird and I'm going to get a little oddly, like businessy technical with this, but you have a Venn diagram of your, let's say, your target fan or target consumer. And in this geek Venn diagram, you can see a lot of overlaps between horror and gaming and audio, like horror audio dramas and comic books. And like, there is a lot of overlap. And one of the things that we recognize is if we can, through some of these casting choices, kind of help all of these different iterations of the Last Wardens promote each other or give value to each other, that's kind of a fantastic opportunity for everyone. And we're doing a lot of things right now to truly leverage that. But I can tell you that because we've had very, very good partners, like with both Mad Cave, Studio Far Horizons, and Encyclopocalypse, everybody collaborated incredibly well, which I can tell you, I have worked as a creative director on products that had multiple gigantic brand entities. It never goes this smoothly. So I am
knock
not
on wood, knock on wood.
I am not taking for granted how collaborative everybody was around what is essentially our, like story, our baby, which is kind of amazing to see. So some of the cast that we managed to get was literally because the guys at Studio Far Horizons have been working in tabletop gaming forever. The end result is kind of amazing.
All right, Elliot, what's going on with the tabletop game, my friend?
Tabletop RPG, yeah. If you go to studiofarhorizons.com, you'll be able to buy the full book itself. And right now, you can actually download what is essentially a demo. You can download both the initial rules and the character sheets for whatever character you want to create, whether it be human or something else. So, and there will be a physical release of the book as well. I think co-published through alongside Mad Cave. It'll be hitting stores as well. So, bam.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, I'll make sure below we have all the details of everything to make it as simple as possible for everybody to jump in. All three of these different mediums. The title is amazing. The art is incredible. You're gonna love this. And I was thinking in my head as I was reading it, and I already mentioned this. Man, I'm making decisions for Danny and others while I'm reading this. And then when you said that there's a board game, this is like perfect because now you create your own character. And what would you do in some of these same situations if you were kind of tasked to find a way out or to kind of understand what's going on around you? And I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And what you've created, I think, is kind of a creator's dream, right? Is not only to have a story, but to have other formats in which this story could be told. And the engagement that you could create with consumers of this story, I think is going to be amazing. I'm hoping that there's some sort of like a Facebook fan page where people could kind of talk about everything that they're doing with the RPG and the characters that they're creating within this world. I could see this going in a lot of different directions, and I couldn't be happier for both of you and the rest of the team that worked on this. It's awesome. So
Thank you.
I'm in for it all. My friends, I am in.
Thank you, sir.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Thank
That
you,
is so beautiful. Anything that we're leaving out that we should tell fans, or did we kind of cover everything? Are we
We have a
missing?
really awesome social media campaign that's going to be kicking off.
That's beautiful.
I think the two of us definitely spent a lot of time on it. So, including,
Yes.
for those. Tune in for those.
I would definitely encourage people to follow both of us on social media because we'll be posting a lot about this with some of the talent involved on all sides of this. We're working on a few related stunts that I can't really talk about yet that we're hoping will materialize as well. So stay tuned. Both of us are going to be in Emerald City Comic Con in March for the launch. And we have panels. We're going to have a signing as well. So, and we always make very, very cool kind of custom merch for the shows. So if you come in to get signed copies, you're gonna get a lot of cool stuff that we're gonna be producing and giving away during these shows. In addition, outside of the Last Wardens verse, we also have a book with humanoids coming out closer to the end of the year. And after all of this winds down and we go hopefully back into production on the next batch, you're also going to see us starting to promote Postmortal, which is our first release out of like multiple books with humanoids. So stay tuned for that.
A very different type of book.
Very different. Is that right?
Super different. I can't listen. I'm going to say this right now. one of our goals in general as writers is to never get, I guess, like typecast or just fall into one box. So we want to do a really vast amount of just a variety of different things. Right now, that led to us having a publishing deal with Paper Cuts. We're working on a middle grade, like a super cute, kind of the opposite of the Last Wardens in every single way. That's going to be more like late 2026, 2027 when it comes out.
Yeah.
But that's how far it's going to steer away. So you're going to see that with a lot of our releases. We're doing a lot of different kinds of projects and different kinds of stories. And we're going to keep gunning for a lot of different kinds of mediums. We're going to try and be as experimental as possible with everything that we do. So if that's your jam, follow us.
I think that's amazing. That's one of the things that I think Mad Cave has done over the last few years to kind of separate themselves as a publisher from other publishers is really ensuring that they have a path of storytelling that could reach people at all different age groups. Paper Cuts is one of those publishers that kind of fall under or that are part of that whole Mad Cave family that is absolutely amazing. So congratulations on that as well. I'll make sure I put all your socials below so that people can follow, obviously, all the other information. Emerald City, is there a plan maybe to kind of bounce around at a few different Comic-Cons, or is Emerald City just all you have so far?
Every year you can find us usually in San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con. Emerald City kind of came up because Mad Cave were like, hey, we want to do a bunch of panels and stuff with you guys. Are you going to show up? And we're like, yes. So it's our first time in that one. There could be other events during the year that we just don't know about. Like last year, I didn't know that I was going to get pulled into ALA, but I ended up in ALA as well, and in Juice in New York. So right now we know for sure we're always going to San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, and now we're going to be in Emerald City as well. Others might pop throughout the year. So once again, in our socials, we're very good at announcing these things ahead of time. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, gentlemen, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate learning more about you. Obviously, digging into this amazing title and just getting to know you. I hope this isn't the last time. I'm hopeful that the story's not over as well, and maybe you're kind of thinking about iterations of this down the road, especially since you have these different formats in which you're telling the story. Because the Last Wardens, I feel like, especially with everything that you shared today, there's probably more story that could be told in a lot of different ways. So fingers crossed we get a little bit more.
Look, we're not ashamed of stating it, especially with this one. Some things that we write are very like they could be one-offs. This is built for serialization, and that is our goal. We're hoping that's going to happen in whatever medium it happens. And we know that Studio for Horizons already wants to do more expansions. We know that Encyclopocalypse is always open to more like audio drama episodes. So it's something that it really all depends on how well we do. So the more people talk about it, the more people are excited about it, the easier it'll be for us to just keep going, because we know where we want Danny and the Wardens to go. And I promise you, it'll be freaking insane. And it's going to be fun.
Well, I love it. Thank you again, gentlemen. Elliot, Amit, thank you so much for entrusting me with your story and allowing me to kind of ask some questions around your creation. And again, let's do this again. Maybe after everything launches, I would love to kind of go over it again, where maybe we could talk a little bit more about the story without giving out too much information before people get their hands on it, because it's a lot of fun and I absolutely enjoyed it. I wish you both the very best. I hope you have an amazing rest of the week, and let's do this again if you're okay with it.
Yes, we are 100% down, and we're going to be promoting Postmortal as well afterwards.
Yes.
So
I would love to have you talk about that too. I can't wait.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate you. Have a good one.
So much.
Bye.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.